it's about understanding that mindfulness is actually a state of mind and a state of life. So you can live in a mindful manner, understanding that the only moment that you have power over is right now.
Welcome to yourbrilliance.com. I'm your host, Amy Waterman. Think of the most powerful woman you know, somebody that you admire beyond belief, somebody who really seems to have it all together. Do you think she ever gets anxious? Like, does she ever get paralyzed with anxiety? It's hard to know, isn't it? Because all we see of people is their outsides, not their insides. But our guest for today, Montse Azaguirre, wants to shed some light about what anxiety feels like on the inside. Montse worked in television for 20 years on programs like The Voice, The Biggest Loser, I'm a Celebrity, Get Me Out of Here. She sailed through the pressure until one day, everything changed. Today, Montse is a mindfulness practitioner on a mission to create a tribe of mindful warriors through her Mindful Living channel. And she's going to be sharing with us some tips on how to manage anxiety. Welcome, Montse.
Hi, thank you so much. I'm so privileged to be on your show. Thank you.
Well, I want to start out with a story about your life back when you were in television and you were single and you were killing it and you were just having this fabulous time.
Yes. So as you said, I started working in television since I was 19 and I just loved it. I fell into something and it felt like I had come home. And so I never felt anxiety ever. I felt stress, obviously, and I felt high levels of nervousness, but never anxiety. So I was working on the biggest shows and as you said, it was The Voice and The Biggest Loser, I'm a Celebrity, Get Me Out of Here, which means that basically for that particular show, you are working at 3:00 in the morning in a jungle with snakes, spiders, leeches, everything venomous because it's in Australia. And you're working with about 300 crew. And it is super, super stressful because you're going live to air. And yet there were levels of stress, obviously, but it was never anxiety. And then when I had my children, I think everything changed. And I know everything changed. I suddenly was at home all the time. I had none of my own financial freedoms like I used to have. I lost all of my own kind of resonance. Everything was just about the children and obviously about my partner, my husband. But more than everything was about the children. And I thought, well, then because I'm a kind of all-in kind of girl. So I thought, okay, like I did in television, come on, once you throw 110% of yourself into this. And I did the same with the children. The thing is, I didn't realize that I had actually started to lose myself. And so I was compromising who I was at every single gate, at every single corner of the decision-making process. And so one day I basically had a huge panic attack and I thought I was dying, but because it felt like I was dying, I couldn't breathe. There was the heart palpitating, everything. And I called my mom and she basically said, I knew this was going to happen. I know what you like. I knew this was going to happen to you. You need to calm down. You're having a panic attack and you have anxiety. And it never occurred to me before, never, ever, even in my wildest dreams, that I would get this. So for me, it was such a shock to my system because I'd never felt that vulnerable ever in my life. Even when you fall in love with someone and they break your heart, that's a different kind of vulnerable. This is vulnerable to your whole life. Like you just don't even recognize who you are.
So one of the things we hear about a lot is postnatal depression, but I don't think many of us hear about postnatal anxiety.
Yes. And for me, the difference was I did go through a little postnatal depression as well, but actually it came after the anxiety. So postnatal depression is when you got the blues and it's a really down, big blues. So you can't get out of that rut. Anxiety is actually hypervigilance. So I was hyper vigilant of everything. My doctor described me as a German Shepherd, 24 hours on guard. And so I didn't have an off switch. So I was constantly worried that something would happen to the children, or that if I walked out into the street with them to the shops, I would collapse, leaving them to the streets. So I couldn't leave the house for a long time. I had to have my mum stay with us, for weeks at a time so that my husband could go to work. And I'd never been like that. Like, she knew that wasn't me. I've been a very independent woman. I'd lived on my own for a decade before my husband came along, and I traveled the world by myself. It was such a shock. And I think that if other women have understood that you're not alone, and that anxiety is a mindset and it is a state of mind. And once you can understand the mechanisms of it, you can understand that you can actually switch it and change it.
So you discovered mindfulness as a result of this, as a way of managing the anxiety. Tell us about how you found out about that.
Yes. So once again, when I had that initial panic attack, the first 6 months was obviously doctor's appointments, neurologist appointments, because everyone thought, well, maybe I've hit my head, something's happened. I just didn't understand how I could have anxiety, because I never recognized it. I didn't know what it looked like. And so I thought it must be something physical inside me. And then everyone said, no, it's here, it's up in your mind. And so I thought, well, I will research this. And so because I've been a researcher in television before, I went straight onto the web and I basically Googled how to fix anxiety. And the first thing that came up was meditation and mindfulness. And so those are the two things that went, right, light bulbs. And I delved into that like a diver in the deep end. I just went for it, because I wanted anything that would fix me. And what I didn't want also was to have to take something. Now, I have to admit that I actually did take something. I had to take some tablets for a short amount of time because it was so unbearable. It was so out of character for me that I had to do something to change that. And so what they did was they didn't make me go, dopey or anything like that. It just allowed me to get that edge off so that I could actually function throughout the day. And while I was in that functioning mode, then I could actually delve into the mindfulness and into the meditation.
So I really like that, because you needed that immediate help, but then you used it to look for long-term solutions. So I know we hear that word mindfulness a lot, but for a lot of us, it's just kind of an amorphous, ambiguous word. What in practical terms did that mean for you?
Yes. So what I loved about it, it is a set of principles. So it came actually from thousands of years ago in the Buddhist temples. And basically it is a mesh between mindfulness and meditation. So it's a set of principles that you meditate on. So for example, the biggest three that most people understand and really want to get, the first one is non-judgment. So not judging yourself and also not judging others. Because I found that especially when I had the anxiety, I was judging myself all the time. I was beating myself up. I was saying, how could you not walk out of this house? For goodness sake, it's it's a safe street. You've got this. You've done this 1,000 times before. And then I would beat myself up a bit more and I say, oh my goodness, why can't we, organize this head of ours? You've done this stuff so many times with crew that have been really cranky, and yet you can't get this done. You can't take home 2 little babies. Come on, Montse. So learning to stop judging myself, witnessing that thought, because it's a lot of the times we're not aware of it. We just kind of let the ramble go on in our mind until we stop and take a breath and just say, okay, I'm going to see myself as just a witness to my thoughts, and I'm going to see what comes through. And you'll notice so much negative stuff. You'll notice that you're constantly judging yourself. You're constantly comparing to others. You're constantly criticizing yourself. And that just adds to the anxiety. It just builds it up and builds it up. So non-judgment, the next for me was acceptance. So accepting the fact that I was in this place. Accepting the fact that I was now a mother, like it or not, and I loved it, but like it or not, this was my new path. And accepting the fact that I didn't have to be a perfect mum. Because, this super mum, it doesn't exist. It doesn't exist, because there is nothing super about being a human being, because you're literally just trying to remember who you were previously. You're trying to remember how to make things a bit easier this time around. And for me, the third big one the third principle was letting go. Letting it go. Let go of the expectation of yourself. Because for me as a professional woman for 20 years, I had high expectations. I had to look nice every day. I had to dress nice every day. I had to speak well every day. I had to work the hardest every day. because as a woman too, you always feel like you need to be competing with the men in our industry, especially. So I was doubling up on everything. And then when I became a mom, I was like, oh, hang on a minute. If I do that, I'm going to crumble. And so it gets down to basics. And that's what I love about mindfulness. It just brings you back to the core principles that you really need to function on.
Yes. What I really find so fascinating about your story is that when you were that professional woman, when you had all that pressure, you were just fine, but it was motherhood. And I do think you're absolutely right. I do think that motherhood puts greater pressure on us in many ways than our professional work, because in motherhood, you're responsible for a life. And that's
Yes.
so much bigger than being responsible to get your job done.
Yeah. And also I think too, and we were talking about this just before, we're in the digital age. And there's Instagram and YouTube. And so we are constantly comparing ourselves to every other beautiful, yummy mummy that has come out the other side of it looking better than they ever did in their whole entire life. Now, that's not me. I still have a few kilos here that I need to get rid of, but I'm realistic with myself, because if I beat myself up about that, that's just going to hurt me more. And the majority of these women that we're seeing on Instagram, that's their lifestyle. That's actually what they created a business around, looking good. And also don't forget that they probably have someone to take care of the kid, like a little nanny, or they have a cleaner come to the house. And they have their groceries delivered to the house. Now, I know it's normal at the moment to have those things done, but it's not normal originally. So I think that we've got to stop beating ourselves up, because I was at my peak performance. I didn't need to compare myself to anyone. I felt great. I was on top of things. But suddenly as a mum, you feel all this pressure, even from like women and men who aren't parents. Suddenly they think, well, why aren't you doing that? Hey, have you tried doing this? And you think, okay, you know what? I'm just going to sit here in my corner and try and do the best I can every single day.
I love that. I think we need to be our own cheerleaders. I think I'll tell you another one that really gets me is Pinterest. All of those crafts on Pinterest.
Yeah, no! I know. There's no way we have time for that,
So I have another question.
Yes.
When you meditated on these principles and you got these principles, did it fix your anxiety? Did that make it go away for good?
So no, that's the short answer. However, yes, in the long term, because like anything, anxiety was something that built up and it then has to build down. So it built up when I got married. It built up when I had my first son. It then built up to a climax when I had my second son. So I had basically, when I got married, I thought, well, now I have to change who I am again, because I have to be someone's wife and I have to be the perfect wife and I have to cook cookies and I have to, make the house look beautiful and I have to nest. That's my thing, right? I have to nest. And then I had to have a child. So I had my first son and I had to make him happiest and I had to read to him and do the flashcards, all these crazy things. And then my second son came and I was so tired because it was 2 years apart. And I was really tired. I had 2 cesareans, so they were not the easiest comebacks from childbirth. And it was just harder on the second one because it had been, 2 or 3 years not working, and working had been my passion. It had been something that I recognized myself in. I could see myself in the mirror and go, I know who you are. Come on, sister, let's go. Whereas when I looked at myself in the mirror after 2 kids and having gotten married, I forgot who I was. I wasn't the same girl anymore. So that built up, the anxiety built up. So what I then did was I started to build it down. So I started meditating on stop judging yourself. And I just kept saying that to myself. And the biggest thing too, and it's something I actually teach people now as well, is that you need to actually visualize yourself in the new form of yourself. So I put on headphones and I put on the best cranking music that I love. And then I imagine myself how I want to feel and look and act in this new version. So I did it last night. I do it whenever I'm feeling a little bit in a lull. And that could simply be, I'm going to wear that little top that I really want to wear. Or I'm going to go to a dinner with just my husband and I and sit happily and have a glass of wine or a champagne, and I'm going to eat just whatever I feel like and not have to share with someone else. You know, simple things that you take for granted. Or even for me, it's about having the ability to empower myself. And I think that that's something that women, we feel like we need to give everyone else the power, and that we don't have any rights, especially as a mum, that we should just be a mum. You know, there's so many people saying, just be a mum. You should just be the best mum possible. Well, hang on a minute. I'm still a human underlying all that.
Oh, I love that. And you teach a lot of these really practical meditations on your Mindful Living channel. I want you to tell us about the work you're doing to try and spread this message of mindfulness.
Thank you. Yes. So I love the Mindful Living channel. So obviously, because I've come from television, I've used those tools to create a website that has video as well as written word. So obviously I have Rogue Minds, which is our magazine, the article, blog posts. And then I talk about the different things that you can use mindfulness to help you with, whether it's business or life, love, everything. But then we also have our Mindful Living channel. And that's basically, we started doing something called, again, Rogue Minds interviews. So these are with people who think in a rogue manner. So rogue means outside the box. Someone a little bit different. You know, the person that climbs Everest, that's a rogue person. And so, you know, I love the idea of some organic farmers because they're thinking differently, or someone who's a Pilates instructor or a yoga instructor because they're not the norm mainstream. It's becoming mainstream, which is awesome, but it wasn't for a very long time. And so I'm kind of giving them a bit of a voice and an airing space, because I think that sometimes people think it's all hoo-ha and it's all a bit, you know, loopy, and it's just not. It's basically common sense things to make you feel good, because we are surrounded by so much stuff to make you feel bad that it's like it's a nice pendulum to the other side. And then obviously we've just started La Buena Vida series, which is basically mindfulness in an understandable video set. So obviously we're in COVID-19, you know, lockdown, most of the world is. So I'm filming around my backyard, and we're doing things that you can do, anyone can do at home, but I do it mindfully. So whether it's cooking, so I cook in every section. So we cook something delicious every day. I did some art last time. We've got a brand new one coming out very soon. So it's about understanding that mindfulness is actually a state of mind and a state of life. So you can live in a mindful manner, understanding that the only moment that you have power over is right now.
And you are actually creating a course as we speak that's about, and I love this, it's about self-esteem and mindfulness. And I mean, this is, self-esteem goes through everything we've been talking about, that judgment of yourself.
Yes.
It's about stopping that.
Yes, absolutely. So I did a course just before everyone went into lockdown. I did a course with some women who were in vulnerable state, who had gone through domestic violence, and I was teaching them mindfulness. And the one thing that highlighted for them was the fact that it actually helped their self-esteem. And I thought, you know what? That's who I want to help then, because any woman or man that feels like they've lost that self-esteem, that self-assurance, needs to know that they can get it back by having these little principles in the back of their head. Wait a minute, I'm not going to judge myself, man, because why am I doing that? I'm beating myself up. No, I'm not going to let, I'm not going to let someone hurt me ever again, because I have self-compassion, and I therefore am not going to let that happen. I'm going to let go of any negative thoughts about myself, because they're just thoughts. They're bubbles that go off into the air. So it's really powerful, and it affects every human being. I mean, I've seen, women in powerful places in television cry about something that's really heartfelt. And I know that anyone can do with a little extra boost in their self-esteem.
Now, for those of you watching, if you want to get hooked up with the course, with the Mindful Living channel, with Rogue Minds magazines, we have a link for you. Just go to yourbrilliance.org/mindful. That's yourbrilliance.org/mindful. Thank you so much, Montse, for coming onto the show. And I wondered if you had any last message you would like to leave our viewers with.
Yes, thank you so much, Amy, for letting me come on board. I'm so happy to be here. And I guess the last message is just be kind to yourself.
I love it. Thank you. And thank you out there for watching. Now, did you have any insights or aha moments while watching this interview? If so, tell us about them in the comments. And for more interviews like these, make sure to subscribe to Your Brilliance TV here on YouTube, and then come on over to yourbrilliance.com for more tips and insights on how you can live your most brilliant life. See you next time.